Hello and good morning to all. Welcome to your computer class. Today we will start our second chapter, that is types of hardware. Fine. In the first chapter, that is computer system, we have discussed about the computer, its functionality, working and functional components. Now in this chapter, we have to discuss the first basic computer of computers in detail. And that first basic component is computers hardware. Fine. Now let's begin. Before starting that, we have to revise some previous concepts that we have discussed. Fine. So in that previous chapter, I have told you that computer is an electronic device. Fine. It means it only works on electronic signals. Fine. Well, our computers has three types. These three types are digital, analog and hybrid computers. These digital computers are the computers which works on digital signals, that is in the form of binary data, zeros and ones. Whereas analog computers are the computers which are generally used for the scientific calculations, and these computers are only used for some specific needs like for calculating or measuring some units. Whereas a hybrid computer is a combined version of a digital as well as a analog computer. It means we can use these computers to work with binary data, which will give you a more accurate result, as well as it will also help you to perform the scientific calculations. It means now you can also measure quantities or units with that particular computer. Fine. So in most of the appliances where we have a circuitry chip, we have this hybrid computer over there. Fine. Now our computer works with two components. These two components are hardwares and softwares. Okay. Now these hardwares are the parts of our computer that we can touch or that we can feel, whereas softwares are the part that we cannot touch. Fine. It means these components can only be seen. We can perform working by using these softwares. Fine. Now in this chapter we have to discuss about the computer hardwares, and then in the chapter number 3 we have to discuss about the computer software. As we have learned earlier, our computer hardware is in 4 parts, that is CPU, memory, input devices and output devices. Earlier I have told you that our CPU is the main part of our computer which processes data. Fine. So the CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. It interprets and carries out the instructions. Fine. Then in the CPU we have two types of memories which are used, and these two types of memories are primary memory and secondary memory. Now you must be thinking that why we are talking about these memories in the CPU. Well, basically the CPU consists of ALU, CU and MU. So it means the second unit MU is already a part of our computer's CPU. Fine. So this memory has two parts, primary memory and secondary memory. Now about these memories we have to discuss in this chapter. Okay. Then next we have input devices. The next hardware component that we have to discuss is input devices. These input devices are the devices through which we can provide data to our computer, or in easy words we can say that through which we can input instructions or data in our computer system. Fine. Next we have output devices. Output devices are the devices with the help of which we can see or check the result, and that result is in a human readable form. Fine. Now it was a quick revision of some previous concepts and a gist of this chapter also. Fine. Now we have to start with the topics of this chapter. First we have to discuss about the basic components of our computer system. Fine. In the first chapter we have discussed about the functional components. Functional components means the components which will explain us the functioning of a computer. And here we have to discuss the basic components. Basic component means components with the help of which this computer is made up of. Fine. So our computer generally consists of two components. These two components are hardware components and software components. Fine. Hardware components. The components of a computer that we can touch or feel are termed as hardware components. It means now every part of your PC or mobile that you are able to hold in your hands, or that you are able to see, that you are able to touch, that you are able to feel, that component will be termed as your hardware component. Fine. Let's talk about your computer's mouse or keyboard or printer or display. So every component that we can touch is termed as our hardware component. Fine. Now our computer's hardware is categorized into 4 categories. The first one is CPU. In this chapter, we don't have to discuss about CPU in detail because we have already covered this discussion of CPU in the first chapter. Fine. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. Central Processing Unit means it is the core unit or it is the main unit which will perform or manage the processing of data. Fine. This CPU comprises of 3 units, and these 3 units are ALU, CU and MU. Fine. So this ALU is the arithmetical and logical unit which performs the arithmetical and logical operations. Then next we have control unit. This control unit is responsible for controlling the inflow and outflow of data. And then next we have some primary storage. That primary storage is responsible for storing the data in the computer's primary memory. Fine. The next component of the hardware is memory. In our computer, memory is the most important resource that is required for storing data. Without memory, we cannot even perform a single operation in our computer. Because whenever we type some instructions, we give some inputs, every input and instruction is first stored in computer's memory. And after the processing step, this memory is also required. Now after processing, our computer stores our data in the computer's memory. So it means this computer's memory is very important for the computer for the input and output process. Next we have input devices and output devices. Well, these input devices and the output devices are the devices through which a user can interact with a computer. Fine. These input devices are the devices through which we can give our data, whereas output devices are the devices through which a user can or a user will get the data from the computer. Okay. Now we have to discuss about the memory in a computer system. This memory of a computer plays a vital role in the whole processing and input-output flow of data. Now let's read and then discuss. We know that CPU of a computer is the real brain behind all the processing that takes place. It means everything that is being processed by the computer is processed inside the CPU only. For processing, instructions and data are made available to CPU. So it means for processing the data, these things are directly given to the CPU, and CPU processes the provided data with the given instructions. It means everything that you will give to the computer will be processed by the computer's CPU as per the given instructions. Now let's take an example. Suppose you want to calculate the product of two numbers 7 and 9. So for that we can give an instruction as multiply 7 and 9 to the computer. Now this term multiply will be the instruction for the computer, whereas the 7 and 9 will work as a input. So after taking this instruction from the computer, our computer will start processing. In the processing part, it will perform this multiplication operation on this digit 7 and 9, and the final result will be 63. That will be 7 multiplied by 9, that will be equals to 63. Fine. Now here comes the roles of our computer memory. Fine. Now after this processing, our computer has to store this data for the future use. And for that, our computer may use the computer's memory. Fine. So CPU needs to have some place where it can hold instructions and data during processing. It means while our computer is processing the data, it needs some space where it can store the data temporarily. And once processing is over, it needs a place where it can store the data permanently or results permanently. Fine. So it means our computer CPU wants some space while it's processing the data, as well as when this processing is completed. Fine. And that's why this computer's memory is very important in the computer. Now we have to discuss about this term memory in detail. Now, computer memory is any physical device capable of storing information temporarily like RAM, that is random access memory, or permanently like ROM. It means computer's memory is a physical component of a computer which can store data either temporarily or permanently. Fine. these memory devices utilize integrated circuits and are used by operating system, softwares and hardwares. Fine. So generally these memories are either permanent or temporary, but these are capable to store the data, and these are made up of integrated chips, and these memories can be used by operating system or softwares or hardware. Now we have to discuss about the type of computer memory. Well, our computer memory is of two types, that is main memory or auxiliary memory. This main memory is also termed as primary memory or internal memory. Fine. Now the memory that is available with the processing chip or the motherboard is termed as the main memory of the computer, whereas the extra piece of memory that we plug in the motherboard is termed as the auxiliary memory. Fine. The memory that holds the data and instructions during processing is called main memory. It means the piece of memory which will help our computer to process data, or that can be used during processing, is termed as the computer's main memory, and generally this memory is temporary in nature. Fine. Well, let's take an example. Suppose your computer has to process some instructions. Well, for the processing purpose, now our computer will simply pass those instructions to the computer's RAM, and because that RAM is directly accessible by the computer's processor, so it will be termed as the computer's main memory. Fine. Next is auxiliary memory or secondary memory. The memory that can store data files or later use. The memory that can store data or files for later use is termed as the auxiliary memory or secondary memory or external memory, and generally this memory is permanent in nature. So I hope that you have got this much. Now we have to discuss about the units of memory. Fine. As in physics, you must have learned some units. As in mathematics also you have learned some units. Similarly in computers we also have to learn some units. Fine. Now for storing data in our computer's memory, some units are required. These units are the basis through which we can identify the amount of data that we are storing or the amount of data that we are using. Fine. So computers store and process data or information in the form of binary numbers. Fine. In the first chapter only I have told you that computer works on the binary digits only. Fine. So a binary number is either 0, that is off or low voltage, or 1, that is on or high voltage, and is known as bit. Fine. So it means these binary digits are termed as bits, and this bit is a short form of the term binary digit. It means now we can say that the full form of bit is binary digit. Fine. Well, when we combine the 8 bits, it forms a byte. Fine. So it means 8 bits is equals to 1 byte, and 1 byte is also made from 2 nibbles, where 1 nibble is equals to 4 bit. Okay. Now a byte of memory is used to store a code to represent a character such as number, a letter or a symbol. Fine. It's a very important point. We have to go through it once again. Fine. It is saying that a byte of memory, it means 1 byte of data is used to store either a character, that can be a letter, number or symbol. Now with the help of these 8 bits or 1 byte, we can represent up to 256 different characters or different codes. Fine. And this is enough to be used. Fine. This was thought enough, and a byte became fixed at 8 bits. Fine. Initially when this term byte was used, at that time they were using only 6 bits for a byte, but later on they have started using 8 bits, because by using 8 bits we can store up to 256 different codes in a single byte. Fine. This allows the 10 decimal number digits, 26 lowercase letters and 26 uppercase letters, including many other symbols. Fine. So it means in these 256 different codes we can store 26 letters of uppercase and lowercase, and numbers also and symbols also. As I have told you just now that every character is represented by a binary sequence. Now for defining that binary sequence, there are some encoding schemes that our computer has to follow. Fine. In computer, characters are represented through a group of bits depending upon encoding scheme. Fine. It means our computer has its own coding procedure through which it can convert our instructions into the binary bits. Fine. Encoding scheme is a way of specifying binary code for each character. It means this encoding scheme is a part of logic which will explain that how a character will be converted into a bit form. Fine. So generally we have two encoding schemes that are used. First one is ASCII, that is ASCII. ASCII stands for American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Fine. This full form you have to learn and write also. Encoding scheme, this ASCII encoding scheme represents a character as a group of 8 bits. Fine. That is 1 byte. Then next we have Unicode. This Unicode is generally used for representing the emojis or some special icons, whereas ASCII is only used for letters, numbers and symbols. Fine. This Unicode encoding scheme represents a character as a group of 16 bits. It means a Unicode is bigger in size and compared to the ASCII code. Next we have units of memory. Now we have different units that we have to use for measuring our data. The smallest unit of computer is 1 bit. Our 1 bit is equals to 1 binary digit that can be equals to 0 or 1. Then second we have 1 nibble. 1 nibble is equals to 4 bits. Then next we have 1 byte. 1 byte is equals to either 8 bits or 2 nibbles. Fine. Next we have 1024 bytes are termed as 1 kilobyte. Then 1 megabyte. 1 megabyte can be represented as 1024 kilobytes. Next we have 1 terabyte that can be represented as 1024 gigabytes. Then petabyte can be represented as 1024 terabytes and so on. So what you have to do, you simply have to go through it once. If in case you feel any difficulty or problem, you can comment down and then we will discuss it once. Fine. Well, there's one more important thing that you must have to know. This term 1024 is equal to 2 to the power 10. Fine. So it means this 1024 can also be written as 2 raised to the power 10. Okay. Now we have to discuss about the computer's main memory. Okay. This computer's main memory has two forms of memories. These are termed as random access memory and read-only memory. Fine. This random access memory is a part of RAM or is a part of computer's memory that is directly accessible by the computer's processor. Fine. Then next we have read-only memory. This read-only memory is also directly accessible, but it stores just few instructions that has to be executed every time when we switch on our computer. Now let's read and then learn. So now we have to discuss about ROM or read-only memory. In this memory, information once stored remains fixed. That is, it cannot be deleted. Fine. In our computer's ROM, whatever we store once, that memory is permanent in nature. So that's why that data cannot be deleted. So RAM can only be read and used. It cannot be changed. Fine. Generally ROM contains a set of startup instructions, that is what to do when a computer is turned on. Fine. In our previous class or in class 8 we have discussed about a term booting. Fine. So that boot instruction is stored inside our computer's ROM. Or sometimes we have found that whenever we turn on our electronic appliances, especially phones, tablets or laptops, you have found that a manufacturer logo appears. So that manufacturer logo is stored in computer's ROM or computer's read-only memory. Fine. And that type of ROM is termed as mask ROM. Fine. So the ROM which stores the manufacturer's logo, it is termed as mask ROM. The contents of ROM remain stored even if the power is turned off. Fine. So the best thing is that whatever is once written in the ROM will be permanent in nature. It cannot be deleted. Fine. And that content will not be erased if we switch off the computer's power supply. Fine. We have three types of ROMs that we have to discuss later on. Fine. The first category is termed as PROM. This PROM can be programmed by a programmer. Fine. PROM stands for Programmable Read-Only Memory. Fine. So this piece of memory can only be programmed by the programmer, and this data cannot be changed after once programmed. Fine. Then next we have EPROM. EPROM stands for Erasable Programmable Read-Only Memory. Now this EPROM is used with some special devices where we once have to just erase that data. So for that purpose we have this EPROM. Fine. Then next we have EEPROM. EEPROM stands for Electrically Erasable Programmable Read-Only Memory. This form of EEPROM can be erased by using the electricity. Then we have one more type, that is UV EPROM. Fine. UV EPROM means by using ultraviolet rays when we erase the data of a ROM, it's termed as UV EPROM. Fine. Then next we have to discuss about random access memory. Random access memory is temporary in nature. Fine. The internal memory that can be read as well as written is called RAM. Fine. It means this form of memory can be read or can be written by a user. Fine. But this RAM is volatile in nature. It means the content of this RAM is not absolute or fixed. Fine. Its content is lost when we switch off the power supply. Just because of this feature of RAM, we use the auxiliary memory or secondary memory. Fine. There are two types of RAM, static RAM and dynamic RAM. Fine. So this is all for today. In the next turn, we have to discuss about some other memory devices, and then we have to discuss about input devices and output devices. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and stay safe. One more important instruction is there. Your notes are already uploaded in the WhatsApp group along with the chapters PDF. Fine. I have uploaded that PDF earlier, so you can simply find that PDF in the WhatsApp group and kindly read this chapter once because it's a very simple but very scoring chapter for class 9th. Fine.